He made the finest shoes in town. His own feet bled with every step. This is the story of Herman and the wound he carried for 47 years. In a small town where cobblestone streets curved between weathered brick buildings, there stood a shoe repair shop that had been open since before most residents were born. The sign above the door had faded long ago, but everyone knew where to find Herman. His hammer's gentle rhythm before dawn was as familiar as birdsong. Herman was 72 years old. His fingers were thick with calluses, stained permanently brown from decades of leather polish. Deep lines carved his face like rivers through stone. To the townspeople, he was a craftsman of extraordinary skill. The mayor wore his shoes. The schoolteacher walked miles daily in boots Herman had cushioned with extra care. Young couples saved months for his wedding shoes, knowing their grandchildren would inherit them still strong. But Herman carried something invisible beneath his quiet smile. Each morning, before any customer arrived, he would pause at his workbench and look down at his own feet. What he saw there, he allowed no one else to see. His shoes were not shoes at all. They were 20-year-old ruins held together by thread and desperation. The soles had worn through in 3 places. Water seeped in on wet days and stayed until nightfall. Pebbles cut into his skin through the holes. His feet were a landscape of blisters, infections, and scars layered upon scars. Every evening, removing those wrecked shoes was a ritual of private agony. He would examine his blackened toenails, his swollen flesh, and feel something heavy press against his chest. He told himself this was practical. Good leather cost money. His best materials belonged to paying customers. But late at night, when sleep refused to come, a different truth whispered in the darkness. One frozen January morning, his right foot refused to hold his weight. The flesh had swollen overnight, red and burning with infection. Herman gripped his workbench, vision swimming, sweat dripping despite the cold. A farmer's boot waited for repair. The work would not stop for his pain. His hands shook, his needle slipped twice. The world tilted dangerously. The door chimed. Herman forced his face into pleasantness, expecting a customer. Instead, Elena stepped inside. She was perhaps 60, wrapped in a faded blue shawl, grey hair pinned back simply. Herman knew her story. Widowed 8 years ago, left with nothing but a crumbling cottage and a garden that barely survived winters. She mended clothes for pennies, cleaned houses for those who could afford help, never once complained. 3 years passed. She had entered this same shop with shoes so destroyed they were barely recognizable. She had no money, she admitted, eyes cast downward with shame. Perhaps she could trade, clean his shop, mend his clothes, anything. Herman had repaired her shoes that night and refused all payment. Scrap leather, he told her. 5 minutes of work. Both were lies she chose to believe. Now she stood studying him with eyes that missed nothing. "You are limping worse today," she said. "Cold weather, old bones." He attempted a smile. Elena did not smile back. Her gaze traveled downward, beneath his workbench, where shadows usually concealed his shame. But today, he had not hidden himself carefully enough. She walked behind his counter without permission. Before Herman could protest, she knelt and lifted his ruined shoe. She held it for a long moment, turning it over, examining the patches upon patches, the holes he had stuffed with newspaper. When she looked up, her eyes glistened. "You fixed my shoes and told me the leather was worthless," she said softly. "You said it took only minutes." Herman's throat tightened. "After I left that day, I watched through your window. I saw you work on the mayor's shoes. I saw how you selected each piece of leather like choosing a child's name. I saw how long true craftsmanship takes." She rose slowly, still holding his shoe. "Why, Herman? Why do you refuse to mend your own?" The question pressed against something locked deep inside him. He opened his mouth to offer another sensible excuse, but her eyes held steady, patient, waiting for truth. The lock broke. "I do not deserve them." The words escaped like prisoners fleeing after decades of captivity. Herman heard his own voice crack and did not recognize it. "My father made shoes for nobility. People traveled from distant cities for his work, and he taught me that a craftsman exists to serve others. That keeping anything for yourself is selfishness. That your worth is measured only by what you sacrifice." Tears slid down his weathered face. He did not stop them. "He died believing I was not good enough, not skilled enough, not sacrificing enough. And I have spent 47 years trying to prove him wrong. I thought if I gave everything away, if I kept nothing, if I suffered enough." His voice collapsed into silence. Elena sat down across from him. She took his trembling hands in her steady ones. "My grandmother raised me," she said quietly. She was a seamstress, the finest in her village. She made wedding dresses that made brides weep with joy. Herman blinked, surprised by the shift. When I was young, I asked her why she always wore plain grey dresses when she created such beauty for others. Do you know what she told me? He shook his head. She said, "I am saving the beautiful fabric for someone who deserves it." She died in that grey dress. Herman, 73 years old, fingers still stained with thread, buried in plain grey wool. Elena squeezed his hands. "I was 16 when she passed. I cleaned out her cottage and found a trunk in the attic. Inside was the most magnificent dress I'd ever seen. Deep blue silk embroidered with silver thread. She had made it for herself 30 years before. She never wore it once." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I buried her in that grey dress when her own creation sat waiting in darkness. I have never forgiven myself for not finding it sooner." Silence filled the shop. Snow began falling outside, soft flakes drifting past the frosted window. "Your father was wrong," Elena continued. "My grandmother was wrong. And you have been wrong for 47 years. The hands that create beauty deserve to wear beauty. The feet that serve others deserve to walk without bleeding. This is not selfishness. This is the simplest truth there is." She pressed his ruined shoe back into his hands. "You are worthy of your own craft. You always were." Herman stared at the shoe. His shoe. This broken, shameful thing he had hidden for so long. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Selfish, not good enough, never enough. But another voice spoke now, quieter but steady. His own. He reached for his finest leather. His hands trembled as he measured his own foot. Cutting material for himself brought fresh tears, not from shame, but from something unfamiliar, something warm. Elena made tea. She handed him tools without speaking. Her presence filled the shop with something the small stove could not provide. By afternoon, Herman held his first pair of shoes in 47 years. He slipped them on slowly, reverently. No pain, no cold, no bleeding. He stood and took one step, then another, then walked to his door and opened it to the snow-covered street. Across the road, the baker was sweeping his doorstep. He looked up, saw Herman standing tall, and noticed immediately. "Herman, new shoes. They look magnificent." Herman smiled. For the first time in decades, the smile reached his eyes. "Made them myself," he said. That evening, a young apprentice cobbler from the next town arrived seeking guidance. Herman welcomed him inside, made tea, and began teaching. But before discussing technique, he removed his new shoes and showed the young man his scarred feet. "Lesson 1, Herman said softly. "The craftsman who destroys himself while serving others has failed his craft entirely. Make shoes for the world, but make them for yourself too." The apprentice nodded slowly, understanding something beyond words. Outside, snow continued falling on the quiet town, and in the little shop on Market Street, 2 pairs of feet rested comfortably. One old, one young, both finally warm.